I moved to Asheville, North Carolina in the summer of 2019. I'd just gotten a job as a graphic designer for a small marketing firm downtown, and I was excited for the fresh start. Asheville is beautiful, surrounded by mountains, full of art and music, and great food. I rented a small house on the east side of town near the Biltmore area. It was a quiet, tree-lined street with a mix of young professionals and older retirees. I felt safe there. I've always been into fitness, and one of the first things I did when I moved was find a good place to run. There was a trail that ran along the French Broad River, about a 10-minute drive from my house. It was paved, well-maintained and beautiful, especially in the early mornings when the mist would rise off the water. I started running there 5 days a week, usually around 6 a.m. before work. For the first few weeks, everything was great. I'd see the same people most mornings. A couple of older men who power walked together, a woman with 2 golden retrievers, a serious-looking guy who always ran past me like he was training for a marathon. We'd nod or wave, that kind of silent runner's acknowledgement. It felt like a community. Then one morning I noticed someone new, a man maybe in his 40s with thinning hair and a red windbreaker. He wasn't running or walking. He was just standing off to the side of the trail near a bench, watching people go by. I didn't think much of it at first. People stopped to rest all the time. But when I looped back around about 20 minutes later, he was still there. Same spot, same posture, and he was looking right at me. I felt uncomfortable, but I didn't want to overreact. Maybe he was waiting for someone. I finished my run and went home. But the next morning, he was there again. Same red windbreaker, same spot. This time when I ran past him, he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was too wide, too deliberate. I kept my eyes forward and picked up my pace. This continued for almost a week. Every morning he'd be there. Sometimes he'd be sitting on the bench, sometimes standing, but always watching. I started altering my route, running in the opposite direction or skipping that section of the trail entirely. But it didn't matter. He'd show up wherever I was. It was like he knew where I'd be. One morning I decided I'd had enough. I stopped running and walked right up to him. "Why do you keep following me?" I said louder than I intended. He just stared at me, that same unsettling smile on his face. He didn't say a word. I pulled out my phone and said, "I'm calling the cops." That's when he finally spoke. His voice was low and raspy, and he said, "I'm not doing anything wrong. This is a public trail." Technically, he was right. He wasn't threatening me. He wasn't touching me. He was just there. I didn't know what to do. I walked away, my hands shaking, and called a friend. She told me to report it anyway, even if the cops couldn't do anything. So I did. I filed a report, described the man, and told them about the red windbreaker. The officer I spoke to was kind, but not exactly hopeful. He said unless the man made a direct threat or broke a law, there wasn't much they could do. He suggested I run somewhere else for a while. I took his advice. I stopped going to that trail and started running in my neighborhood instead. It felt safer, even though it wasn't as scenic. For about 2 weeks, everything was fine. I started to relax, just started to think maybe the guy had just been some weirdo who got bored and moved on. But then I saw him again, not on the trail, on my street. I was coming back from a run, cooling down in front of my house, when I saw the red windbreaker. He was standing at the end of the block, partially hidden behind a parked car, watching me. My stomach dropped. I ran inside and locked the door. I peeked through the blinds, and he was still there, just standing. I called the police again. This time they sent an officer to my house. By the time he arrived, the man was gone. The officer walked around the block, checked the area, but found nothing. He suggested I install security cameras and consider getting a restraining order, but he said I'd need more evidence to make it stick. I bought 2 cameras that night and installed them myself, one facing the front door, one facing the street. I also told my neighbors what was going on. Most of them were sympathetic, said they'd keep an eye out. One of them, an older man named George, even gave me his phone number and told me to call if I saw the guy again. For a few days, nothing happened. I started to feel like maybe the police visit had scared him off. But then one night around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with an alert from the security camera, motion detected. I opened the app and my heart nearly stopped. He was standing in my driveway, just standing there looking at the camera. His face was lit up by the infrared light, pale and expressionless. He stood there for almost 5 minutes, then walked away. I called 911. The dispatcher told me to stay inside and lock all my doors. 2 officers arrived within 10 minutes, but once again he was gone. They reviewed the footage, and one of them recognized him. Apparently, he'd been arrested a few years back for stalking another woman in a different part of town. He'd served some time, gotten out, and now here he was again. They told me they'd look for him, visit him, and make it clear that he needed to stay away from me, but they also told me very directly that I should consider staying somewhere else for a while. That scared me more than anything. It meant they didn't think they could stop him. I packed a bag and stayed with a friend for a week. When I came back, I had new locks installed, kept the cameras running, and barely slept. Every little sound made me jump. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I broke my lease, lost my deposit, and moved to a different part of town. I didn't tell anyone my new address except my employer and a couple of close friends. It's been almost a year, and I haven't seen him since. But I still check the cameras every night before bed. I still look over my shoulder when I'm out running. And I'll never feel completely safe again, because I know he's out there. And I know that people like him don't just stop. What I haven't shared with many people is what happened. During that week, I stayed with my friend, and what I learned about the man in the red windbreaker. His name, I found out from the police report, was Dennis Carver. He was 43 years old, lived alone in a rundown apartment complex on the west side of Asheville, and had a criminal record that made my skin crawl. The officer who came to my house the second time was more forthcoming than the first. He told me that Dennis had been arrested in 2015 for stalking a woman named Jessica Monroe. Jessica had been a nurse at Mission Hospital, and Dennis had become obsessed with her after a brief encounter at a coffee shop. He followed her for months, showed up at her work, her gym, her home. He never physically harmed her, but the psychological toll was immense. Jessica eventually got a restraining order, and Dennis was arrested when he violated it. He served 18 months and was released in 2017. The officer told me that Dennis was known to the police. He'd been reported multiple times for loitering, following women, and making people uncomfortable. But because he never made explicit threats or committed acts of violence, there was little they could do beyond warning him. The officer gave me Jessica's contact information and suggested I reach out to her. He thought it might help to talk to someone who'd been through the same thing. I was hesitant at first. I didn't want to drag someone else into my nightmare, but I also desperately wanted answers. So I sent Jessica an email explaining who I was and what was happening. She responded within hours. She said she'd be happy to talk and gave me her phone number. We spoke that evening. Jessica was kind and understanding, but I could hear the residual fear in her voice. She told me that Dennis was methodical and patient. He didn't act impulsively. He studied his targets, learned their routines, and inserted himself into their lives gradually. She said the worst part wasn't the fear of physical harm. It was the constant feeling of being watched, of never being alone. He made me feel like I was losing my mind, Jessica said. I'd see him everywhere, and then when I'd try to point him out to someone, he'd be gone. People started to think I was paranoid. I told her about the trail, about seeing him on my street, about the camera footage. She listened quietly, and when I finished, she said, "He's escalating. That's what he does. He starts slow, just watching, and then he gets bolder. With me, it got to the point where he was leaving things on my doorstep. Flowers, notes, little gifts. It was like he thought we were in a relationship." "What did you do?" I asked. "I moved," she said. "I left Asheville, changed my phone number, and deleted all my social media. I basically disappeared. It was the only way I felt safe." Her words hung in the air. I didn't want to uproot my entire life because of this man, but I also didn't know what else to do. Jessica gave me some advice. Document everything, vary my routine, never be predictable, and most importantly, trust my instincts. She also told me to be careful, that Dennis was smart and knew how to stay just within the boundaries of the law. After we hung up, I felt a strange mix of validation and terror. Validation because someone believed me, understood what I was going through. Terror because I now knew that this wasn't going to end easily. The next few days were some of the hardest of my life. I stayed with my friend Rachel, but I felt like I was putting her in danger. Every time a car drove by slowly or someone knocked on the door, I'd freeze. Rachel tried to be supportive, but I could tell she was getting anxious too. One night, she gently suggested that maybe I should take Jessica's advice and leave Asheville altogether. I considered it. I really did. But something in me refused to run. I'd built a life here. I had a good job, friends, and a home I loved. Why should I be the one to leave? Why should he get to win? So I made a decision. I was going to confront this head on. I reached out to a lawyer and asked about getting a restraining order. The lawyer was honest with me. Without explicit threats or documented harassment, it would be difficult. But she said we could try, that the camera footage and police reports might be enough. We filed the petition. A court date was set for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, I moved back into my house. I wasn't going to let fear control me. I installed additional cameras, got a security system with 24/7 monitoring, and even adopted a dog, a German Shepherd named Max. He was young and energetic, but the trainer I worked with said he had good protective instincts. Max changed everything. Just having him there made me feel safer. He'd alert me to every sound, every movement outside, and knowing that he was there, that I wasn't completely alone, helped me sleep at night. The court date arrived. I showed up with my lawyer, prepared to present my case. Dennis was there too, sitting in the back of the courtroom with a court-appointed attorney. Seeing him in person again made my stomach turn. He looked so ordinary, so harmless. But I knew better. The hearing was brief. My lawyer presented the evidence, the police reports, the camera footage, and my testimony. Dennis's lawyer argued that his client had done nothing illegal, that he was simply exercising his right to be in public spaces. The judge listened carefully, reviewed the footage, and then made his ruling. He granted a temporary restraining order. Dennis was to stay at least 500 feet away from me, my home, and my workplace. If he violated it, he'd be arrested. The order would be in effect for 1 year, after which we'd revisit it. I felt a wave of relief, but also doubt. Would a piece of paper really stop him? Jessica's words echoed in my mind. He's smart. He knows how to stay just within the boundaries. For a while, it seemed to work. I didn't see Dennis again. The cameras didn't pick up any unusual activity. I started running on the trail again, though I varied my times and always brought Max with me. Slowly, I began to reclaim my life. But then, about 3 months after the restraining order was issued, something happened that shattered my sense of security. I came home from work one evening to find an envelope tucked under my doormat. There was no stamp, no return address, just my name, written in neat, careful handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single photograph. It was a picture of me, taken from a distance, running on the trail with Max. On the back, written in the same handwriting, were 4 words: "I'm still watching you." I called the police immediately. They came, took the envelope as evidence, and added it to the file. But there was no way to prove Dennis had left it. No fingerprints, no DNA, nothing. The officer told me to be vigilant, to report any further incidents. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about the photograph, about how close he must have been to take it. He was still out there, still watching, still waiting. The restraining order meant nothing to him. The next morning, I made the hardest decision of my life. I called my boss and told him I needed to take a leave of absence. Then I called a moving company and started packing. Rachel helped me, didn't ask questions, just supported me. Within a week, I was gone. I moved to Charlotte, about 2 hours away. I found a new apartment, a new job, and started over. I didn't tell anyone in Asheville where I was going except Rachel and my lawyer. I deleted my social media, changed my phone number, and cut ties with anyone who might inadvertently reveal my location. It's been almost a year now, and I haven't seen Dennis since. But I still live with the fear. I still check over my shoulder, still vary my routine, still keep Max close. I've thought about going back to Asheville, about reclaiming the life I had to leave behind, but I can't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Jessica was right. The only way to feel safe was to disappear, and so I did. I just hope that wherever Dennis Carver is, he's found someone else to fixate on, or better yet, that he's gotten the help he clearly needs. But deep down, I know that's unlikely. People like him don't change. They just move on to the next target, and sometimes late at night, I wonder if he's looking for me, if he's somehow figured out where I am. I tell myself I'm being paranoid, that I'm safe here. But I know the truth. I'll never truly be safe as long as he's out there. Because people like Dennis don't stop. They just wait.